I'm Bailey Parnell, and this is Let's Think This Through. Join me for drinks as I bring on guests for conversations that inspire, amuse, and challenge us, but in a fun and relaxing kind of way. Ultimately, it's to help us all learn and live a better, easier life. So let's think this through. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Think This Through with me, Bailey Parnell. So, someone copies a part of your TED Talk. What would you do in this case? Well, this happened to me recently, and for context about the story I'm about to tell you, you have to know that I have a TED Talk called Is Social Media Hurting Your Mental Health? It was released on their YouTube channels in 2017, and I'm very glad to say that the talk has been seen over 4 million times. Thank you to wonderful messages from you, and over the years, I am also very aware that it is used in classrooms all over the world. Okay, there's the context. Now, about a month ago, I got a DM on Instagram from someone whose name was Danish or Swedish, certainly Nordic, so from one of those countries. This man had watched my TED Talk and said to me, quote, "Have you seen this girl that literally copied your TED Talk?" Close quote. He actually included a screenshot of the YouTube video of someone else's talk called Impact of Social Media on Youth. And then he said, quote, "It makes me really mad." Now, without watching the talk, I said, all good. There's lots to say on the subject. That's actually what I wrote. Because I'm just thinking, okay, someone did a TED Talk about social media and mental health, and there is a lot to say on the subject. No, but then he replies, "No, she literally copied exactly what you said. I have studied both talks." So then I was like, oh, really? Okay, send me the link. And he does. Well, I watched the full talk from the other woman. And while it wasn't a carbon copy, there were absolutely many phrases, concepts, and even the talk structure that mimics my TED Talk released 6 years prior. So much so that I actually read comments from people that said this copies Bailey's talk, and this is a copy of Miss Parnell's talk in 2017. Now, some of you listening have probably already had a gut reaction to this. Like many people I've told, your gut is making you think, oh my gosh, taking someone else's work without credit is deeply wrong. Like you feel it's wrong. Maybe you're angry for me. You're like, Bailey, you should tell Ted, you should have them take it down. But there was more to consider here. And honestly, true to form, I really had to think this one through because it was not clear to me what to do at first, and it still is not fully clear to me. One side of me, especially the academic in me who makes a living off of sharing my ideas, believes that taking credit for someone else's ideas without acknowledging the thinkers that came before you does feel wrong. However, should there be consequences for this, and what should they be, and should they be different for different kinds of people? And to give you further context, the woman who copied parts of my talk is a young, presumably around 18 to 20-year-old Black woman from Kenya who gave this TED Talk through her school. Let's pretend she's about 19 years old. Now, if that's the case, it is actually very possible that she has watched my talk in her classrooms for 6 years, since she was about 13 years old. And my goal of giving the TED Talk was that these ideas would spread. TED's literal slogan is ideas worth spreading. So a big part of me thinks, isn't this proof? Like, is this proof that my idea has indeed spread? Of course, it's extremely important to me that more people know about social media and what it can do to your mental health. And so I am happy that more people, and especially younger people, are talking about this exact issue. That is what I want. That is literally one of the major goals of my work. So that part makes me happy. Now, there's this other layer of this, though, that also feels wrong. If I go to TED and I have them take it down, there's something that feels very wrong about another North American white woman who has found now in my life some educational privilege, taking down the early career of another young Black African woman, especially when I'm doing just fine over here and my TED Talk is doing just fine. So what do you do in this case? Do you go to TED? Do you ask for credit? Do I reach out directly to her? Do I do nothing? I actually haven't acted on this yet, so it is an open conversation that I'm about to have with my guest. Like much of my thinking, I like to bounce it off of others, which of course is part of the reason why this entire show exists. One friend that I actually happened to be on a trip with, completely unplanned, shortly after this was brought to me, was Miss Andrea Henry. You are going to love having a drink with Andrea. We are going to talk about the situation. We share a peak performance coach. We are both women in business, and we're going to share it over a cocktail. So let's meet Andrea. Andrea, I am very glad to have you here. What are you drinking over there?
I'm having a vodka cocktail only because I forgot my wine opener. So wine was the first choice, but I'm so excited to be here. I think this is going to be a great chat.
Yes, me too. And I actually did opt for the wine tonight as well. Well,
Mhm.
as your intended plan. However, I actually went into the fridge yesterday and I was so excited. It was Sunday night. I was going to have a nice glass of red wine. And then I think I forgot how long it has been in the fridge.
Uh-oh.
And so the fact that it's in the fridge should tell everybody something. It's been a while. It went bad.
Plan B.
So, yes, I was so excited to get a new bottle tonight and talk to you.
Well, where
Now,
I'm at my office, if I was at home, I would have access to a fuller bar. But I think it does say something about our office that I did have a choice between wine and vodka.
you're in the office and you have vodka tonics to go? Is this 1960?
Right? We're like recreating Mad Men, but in an all-woman firm.
I love that, which it leads me to. Can you please introduce yourself for the people? Like, how are you introducing yourself these days?
Sure. So I'm Andrea Henry. I'm a business lawyer and an IP strategist with Henry Brooks LLP. I am obsessed with intellectual property and how we can use it to build wealth.
Hmm. Yeah, so you own this firm. Andrea is a kick ass lawyer. And I see you online as well, helping everyone else understand a little bit more about how their work and how their thoughts really could be something that they sell.
Yeah. I love so intellectual property is anything that we as humans come up with out of our brilliant brain, right? So books, songs, new inventions, courses, whatever we can create. What I love about it is that it's so egalitarian, right? So for almost every other type of asset, if you think about real estate or, stocks and bonds, you need to have money first in order to invest in those assets. You can be flat broke as long as you're not broke creatively, you
Listen,
can
I've been
create an
there.
asset. Yeah, that's why I love it.
I have been I have been flat broke
Oh, me too.
and relying on the ideas that come out of my head. So
Hmm.
I know exactly what you're saying.
That's why I
Now,
love it.
just before this, the audience heard me tell the story about my TED Talk being copied in some ways, which I know that we've had a conversation about this. And have you ever had someone copy your work?
Oh, it's currently happening.
No.
Like for real. So
Right
just
now?
like right now, just 2 weeks ago, I got a little nudge. So, as you were saying, we share a peak performance coach who's also very into the woo woo. And, I've been really leaning into following little
Mm-hmm.
nudges. And I had a nudge to go look at the account of a former team member that I hadn't looked at for a year. And she had blocked us on all of her accounts. So I went to have like a little alt account that I use for family stuff. So I went to that account and this young lady had like stolen a whole post and was coming up with it. I was announcing the launch of something new that I knew that she had access to and like was word for word copying it. So I
Oh
was
my
like, "Ooh, it's a
gosh.
good thing that I followed that nudge." And the thing is, I showed my business partner it, who knew who it was. And she's like, "Oh, she's copying your posts and she's like she's set up her practice in the same way as yours." That in itself, I wasn't upset with. Because I really feel this is going to sound strange coming from an IP lawyer, but I genuinely feel people can copy your output, but they can't copy your input. So if someone steals a client intake form or says something in a particular way, the reason I say it that way is because that's who I am. If you copy it, it's
Mhm.
not going to work the same way for you because it's not authentic to you, right? It's not coming from
Mm.
your lived experience and education and what you're passionate about. However, if someone copies something you've actually created, so like a course or templates or an invention, that's where I draw the line, and it's at that point that we send cease and desist letters.
Did you?
Yep.
And this was recently?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks ago. Well,
My
how
gosh, so did
interesting
you
that the timing, right?
I know. I know. Everyone, this was completely unplanned, but this is this is exactly when I was put in front of Andrea what was it? A month ago now on our trip. Trust me, I would have talked to Andrea about anything, but she just also happens to be an IP lawyer. So imagine getting her opinion on this. Why would you copy an IP lawyer?
No, because you think that you're not going to get caught, I guess. I don't know. I
That
I
just is
I'm
not.
quite flabbergasted at it, but it's not the first time it's happened. I was working with a marketer once who was doing some research, and she's like, "By the way, one of your competitors has stolen your whole email sequence, like to the to the letter."
Okay,
And
so
again,
Okay, so if you don't know what that is, because I know that there's some members of my family that don't know what like a drip campaign is or any of these things. An email sequence is like when a client reaches out to me or reaches out to Andrea, you're going to get that first initial response from the company, like when you fill out a contact form. Then
yeah,
maybe you answer the first two questions. Then you get a really special email back. All
yeah,
of this can be automated in a sequence. And Andrea, are you telling me that an email sequence is IP?
yeah. Oh yeah, an email sequence is IP.
What?
Absolutely. Because what are you doing in your email sequence? You're introducing that client or customer to what it's like to work with you. And you're showcasing your brand, you're showcasing your values. Like that, an email sequence, whether it's marketing or whether it's client intake, is a really strong part of your brand and your procedures. It's absolutely IP.
Hmm.
And once again,
Okay.
sent a very strong cease and desist letter threatening. And this is the thing, if someone copies something from you and they make money off of it, at law, you're entitled to all of their profits. So I just remind people of that
Right.
in the letters.
And also, again, why are you copying an IP lawyer? Like, they literally know everything to do in this case.
People think that
So,
they'll get
how
away
did it?
with it. Yeah.
True. But you know what? I wonder if it just feels different for different people because I'm noticing my reaction to what you're saying. And I've seen people have this reaction to me when I tell them about the TED Talk, even though you know that I've thought through different
Yeah.
aspects of it now. But like, how did it, like 2 weeks ago, how do you feel? Like, how did it make you feel when you first saw this?
Yeah. So I'm really working on seeing the silver lining and everything. So my first thought was actually one of pity, right? I was like, it's so sad that you're not able to come up with your own ideas and follow your own passion. Like I knew what this young lady was interested in. It was something that she could have built a practice off of. I was like, you would have been much better off and it would have come across. Remember, Bailey, one of the things that we learned at the retreat in Arizona was that whole study about the vibrations coming off of the human body. And if I remember correctly, the number one vibration was authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
So if you steal someone else's work, it backfires because however beautiful the email sequence is, they eventually have to meet you, right? They eventually have to be delivered services by you or by your team. And if that's not really reflective of who you are, it's going to be jarring to your client or customer. So really it was, I think that this was, done because they thought it was well done, but it doesn't help you in the long run. I feel differently about actual created products because here's the thing, if you sell a template or a course or anything that's standalone, I'm not interacting with the client necessarily. That's something that someone can do on their own. That, if you copy it, is actual theft. And so for me,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I draw the line. Some people draw it earlier, but for me, I tend to use a couple of, copy a couple of
Yeah.
posts you're very heavily inspired by the particular way that I do business. I chalk that up to the universe will deal with that. But if it's to do with
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah.
that's where you don't have the opportunity to interact with the client and show your distinctiveness. And so that's something where I won't let that slide.
Right. No, you know what? It makes perfect sense too. And I feel like I struggle with this a little bit because we in a way, I for sure, and I know that parts of your role increasingly so are thought leadership.
Yeah.
Like we both do speaking, writing, teaching, and and success in my line of work is quite literally that people adopt my ideas.
Makes it tricky,
So
right? It makes it
it's very
super
tricky.
tricky. So here's what I tell clients. If you're a thought leader, and even if you're not, if you're doing content marketing, basically if you're doing any type of service, you do have to share some of your framework. Like you have to share enough for people to know who you are and trust what you do. I think a lot of it is the intention with which we share. So if you are sharing something with the intention that people adopt your ideas and that people spread it and incorporate it into what they're doing, if that's your intention, then yes, it's intellectual property, but it's not really damaging to you if someone does the thing that you wanted them to do. It's different if you're like, hey, I have a proprietary program or a particular way of doing something, and I only want that to be available to people who have paid me to do that. Then, when you're sharing, you have to be really cautious about how much you share, and you give just enough that people, can see what it is that you're doing. But the information is essentially behind the paywall. So it's the intention of it. When people go viral, they want people to comment
Mm.
and stitch. And if you think about social media, they want people to stitch the videos and comment. And you're not worried about people using the intellectual property because the intent of the intellectual property was to be shared.
Yeah, that is so true, especially on something like TikTok now. I really think social media in general has changed the nature of
Oh, yeah.
of what is my knowledge and what is my
Yeah.
way of even presenting it if I'm literally intending someone else to stitch it into theirs.
That's it. That's exactly it. It's just all about the intention. Someone who is an influencer, someone who's a thought leader, has a very different intention when they're creating intellectual property than someone who is creating a course to be licensed or someone who's creating an invention to be patented.
Yeah, so I guess if you think back to the TED Talk, that is what entered me into certainly one of the questions that I had to wrestle with, which is on one side, I think that especially the academic side of me, and I say that, and earlier the listeners heard this, that stealing someone's ideas without credit, feels inherently wrong.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that Ted's goal is literally ideas worth spreading.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot about at what point is something just my knowledge? Like,
Yeah.
where do someone's thoughts end and someone's start? Because if I learned something, for example, 15 years ago and I've integrated it and I've used it and whatnot, at what point, this is kind of philosophical, is
Yeah.
it just Bailey as a human who has knowledge now that I've encountered in life? Like,
Yeah.
literally everything could be attributed.
Yeah. What does the Bible say? There's nothing new under the sun. I'm a pastor's daughter, so it comes out sometimes. But there's nothing new under the sun, right? There is
Did you
nothing
just
that
say pastor? What'd
I'm
you
a
say?
pastor's daughter.
Pastor's daughter?
So sometimes the Bible
Okay, a little
verses.
slip it in there.
So that's what it reminded me of. There's a verse in the Bible that says there's nothing new under the sun. Like we are all
Yeah, okay.
influenced by someone else. Like there's nothing. Even if you look at revolutionary inventions like the iPhone itself is an amalgamation of other things that had already been created, right? It was the phone and the keyboard and video camera,
Hmm.
whatever, right? Like it's so often what we're doing is changing a process or changing a particular like lens through which we see something. Unless you go back to the beginning of human history, most of what we're doing now is an improvement or a slight change to something that already exists. And it is tricky, right? To figure out like where is the boundary. But sorry, I'm just gonna We're gonna
That's all
edit this
right.
out. I have do not disturb on. I don't know why it came through, but
Listen, we have people wanting your IP all over the place. They do not know when you're recording the most interesting podcast of your life. So it's okay.
all right, back to that. It is difficult. It is difficult to wrap your head around what is yours and what's a copy. And I think people, generally speaking, will give grace if there's attribution, or if it's genuinely you've gone to school for this and it's a combination of what you've been taught and lived experience and multiple teachers. That's very different from, I did this course and the person made it
Mhm.
seem really easy, and now I did a new course and I just called it something different, but the modules are the same and the workbooks are the same, and that's, I think, very different. And so where there's gray areas, often people struggle with claiming their intellectual property because they think, well, but this person I learned at the feet of this philosopher or this student, and that's what that's what influenced me to start down this path. And I don't know how different I am. So if you're bringing things together, if a lot of this is your lived experience as it applies to what you've been taught, then you've made something yours. If you are
Mhm.
copying and pasting large chunks of what someone has taught you, that's very different.
And you know what? With the TED Talk, that's what I think rubs people the wrong way because I don't know if you remember this, but I actually said to the guy when he first reached out to me, I
Yeah.
said, all good. There's lots to say on this subject. Because listen, I was at a holiday Christmas party last week for a speakers bureau.
Yeah.
Everybody in this room has something to say about leadership, let's just say,
Yeah.
or change management or
Yeah.
teamwork. It's really your perspective on it and your literal presentation of it that becomes so personal. And because there was copied elements of that, I think that's why this guy actually said in the DMs, this makes me mad. Like it makes people have an
Yeah.
affective response.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think people can tell when it's influence and when it's copying, right? Because that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. If you're influenced by someone, you may see elements of someone else's work in it, but you're also going to see that person's personality and kind of twist or their lens on it. When people are actively copying, they copy mannerisms, they copy like the sayings down to down to the letter. They'll copy stories which are not yours, right? And so I think people have such a visceral reaction to it because I think as humans we can tell when somebody's being fake. Not all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But in those types of environments, if someone's really familiar with your work and how you present it, you can tell when someone's not just influenced by your work, but is trying to copy not just what you say, but how you say it.
Mm-hmm. There's there's got to be something really deep and psychological about this because it really makes people mad
Yeah.
to even, it makes them mad even when they don't have conscious reasoning. Like if you think about, it's popped into my head, thinking about my young nieces who are, different ages, like 7,
Mm.
10, and when kids get so mad that when they feel that they're true original and they
Yeah.
wore this thing to school and
Yeah.
someone else copied them and wore it. And
Yeah.
then what do you say to them? You say,
Just
how many parents
yeah.
how many parents say it's a compliment,
Compliment.
but it doesn't feel that way.
It doesn't feel like a compliment. It really doesn't. And I know people say that to excuse it. And when I told my mom about it, she's like, "Oh, it's a compliment." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's a compliment to me if I inspire you. If I can see elements of what I do, if I can see, and this has happened before and I'm fine with it, where I can see people have said, "Oh, Andrea did this particular thing. I'm going to use it and apply it to what I'm doing." That's fine. That's a compliment. A complete grab is not a compliment. That is a basis for a court case. It's what that is. But no,
Says the
I do
lawyer.
think that whole issue of authenticity, I think we can tell, right? If we're paying attention, I think we can tell
Mhm.
when someone is presenting something because they have come up with it or they have a particular lens on it and they're genuine than when someone's like, I watched this person and they were successful saying this thing in this way, and I want to be successful, so I'm going to do the same thing. It feels different.
Hmm. Yeah, it definitely does. And, part of what I wanted to consider and what to do about being copied was, I never actually considered anything legal, and I still am not, but
Yeah, that's fine.
I did consider, I guess the most like legal critical version of it would have been reaching out to Ted, or would be, because I have not actually acted on this yet, would be
Yeah,
reaching out to Ted and saying, this is what was sent to me. I've read the comments. Other people are seeing this too. It's not just me.
yeah,
And, can you take this down? And I thought to myself, yeah, so there's the elements about, yes, it feels wrong. But then our coach, so to give some context here, Andrea and we both share the same peak performance coach. Dare we say, shout out Hina
yeah.
Khan, because who doesn't love a little credit, right? We like,
That's
and,
right.
and one of the questions that was posed to me, and I'm going to pose it to you because I don't actually know
Mhm.
the answer, what it is for you yet in the case that you're going through, but it was, what would you love? Like, what would be
Yeah,
best case scenario? And I'm thinking, I don't want to ruin another young woman's career, especially another young Black woman's career from Africa, who
yeah,
for which I share a lot of love for,
yeah,
and also she's talking about what I want people to be talking about.
yeah,
I want her to talk about this.
yeah,
And so then when it was like, what would you love? I thought, well, you know what? Yeah, there is a part of me for sure. Like, as humble as I am, I would like credit. You want, maybe it's part of that deep part of us that's like, you want your ideas to mean something or to be
yeah.
there. But hmm, what would you love? Because with the thing, I mean, it sounds like you've already taken some action, but I still don't have the answer. You see that
Yeah,
and also it was concealed from you. I mean, there's an element of this too that's a bit different, which was you said that they blocked you on all
yeah,
the accounts. So it was openly concealed.
exactly. I love that phrase, openly concealed. So here's the thing.
I
I
know.
did.
I guess that is a I guess that is
No,
a bit
I
of a
love it though,
conundrum,
but
isn't
it
it?
makes sense. It makes sense in this context. I did ask myself, what would I love? And as I said, my business partner, who she also blocks, like she blocks everyone in my life that could possibly let me know, which is how I know it was intentional. And so I think there's a
Mm,
different element to it where you know that what you're doing is wrong and you're trying to conceal it. To me, it's very different from someone doing something out of ignorance or just not understanding, the correct parameters. The other thing is, what I would love, like you, is to have ideas shared. So if someone's speaking about intellectual property and they're like, oh, this is a wonderful idea, and I did this in my business because I was able to, harness my intellectual property, wonderful. The little human ego side of me would love it if they said, as Andrea said, or Andrea inspired me to go do this, right? I won't
yeah,
lie,
you
that
would.
feels good, right? But I certainly would like, I would love for those ideas to get more circulated. I would not love to feel taken advantage of. If I have poured energy and resources into creating an asset and have that asset then essentially stolen, that I would not love
Mm-hmm.
at all. I think that's quite, and I think, again, the intention. So when I'm speaking publicly, when I'm teaching, when I'm writing, it is with the intention of those ideas to be spread. So I want people to spread them. I'd love the credit, but really the idea that the underlying mission is for that. What I want people to know is you can start from nothing and harness the brilliance of your brain and create
Mm-hmm.
life changing and generation changing wealth. If people are
Mm-hmm.
spreading that idea, amazing. That's very different from the intention that I had in creating these templates, which was to sell them. And I cannot sell
That's
them.
right.
Someone else has them and is also selling them.
Yeah, which I think is a interesting kind of distinguishing factor there.
Yeah.
If someone is copying the thing for which you make your living, maybe that's a little bit different than me sharing an idea on an open source platform
Yeah.
that is meant to be shared with the slogan, ideas worth spreading.
Yeah.
Like,
That's right in the title. It's
it's
right on the tin.
right in the slogan.
Yeah.
So I guess the other thing that, I would love, if I think about it, is, and that I would love in your case too, is that these other people, that let's assume best intention, though it sounds like you have a little bit more insight in the intention with the concealment there, but I will assume best intentions, right? And in that case, it is very possible this person's been listening to my TED Talk since they were like, let's say, I don't even know, 13 years old.
Yeah.
And and
So inspired.
best in
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's best case scenario. So
Yeah.
then in this case, what I would love is that that's true. And that the other thing I would love is that they don't make this mistake again. Because in a way, I actually really believe that
Yeah.
they are very lucky it was me.
Yeah. And not someone else. It could have been a significant misstep with someone else. And so
Yeah.
I think you can be in your higher faculties and be of abundance and still make it clear to someone for their benefit and for like the world that, hey, if you're going to do this, it's wonderful to be inspired. It's wonderful to spread ideas. We are all for that. There is a way to do that that is respectful to the person who's the originator of the idea or the concept or the talk.
Right. And maybe even like reaching out to her is another option as well. And I suppose clarifying intention, but also
Yeah.
because there's a piece of me now that thinks, oh my gosh, what if she does this in school and is kicked out of school? Like, this
Yeah.
is what I mean. Or what if
Yeah.
she does receive a cease and desist
Yeah.
from someone else who's not me? And I
Exactly.
could have helped her.
This is it. I've done that. Oh, not so much in IP law, but you can let someone know that they're on the wrong, on their offside without you necessarily enforcing it. So in Canada, there's anti-spam legislation, which has really strict requirements around who can send you a marketing email. Not everyone knows about that legislation. And so every so often, I get emails from people that I have not consented to marketing emails and who I have not done business with, but they found the name or the address somewhere. And I send them it's like a form email now, which is, I'm not going to tell anyone, but you should know that you're not supposed to do this. Here's the link
No,
to
you
the,
are not.
I do. Here's the link to the legislation. I'm not going to turn you in, but someone else may. And so you should be aware of this. But most people write back and thank me. They're like, I didn't know. Thank you. Some people you can tell they were just trying to get away with it and they ignore me. But I've had quite a few people be like, thanks for letting me know that I didn't know.
Okay,
So
Andrea,
maybe she
in
didn't
my
know.
head right now,
Yeah.
you are the superhero saving us all from spam emails. And I need what you write in your email back to them. I'm going to keep it on like my Google little templates and be like, an IP lawyer told me that you do not have a right to send me this in Canada.
I'm happy to
Okay,
share it. Yeah. But
cheers
that
to
idea,
that.
not everyone knows. Cheers to that. Not everyone knows.
Superhero Andrea.
If you tell them stuff that they don't, well, most people. Hopefully, if we lead with that intention that someone genuinely didn't know, if I'm doing the wrong thing, I want someone to tell me before it gets worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think that you are strangely acting in a place of abundance and friendliness. You are acting as the person that you want to be, which
Yeah.
is the superhero saving us all from spam emails, but also you are literally an educator in this space. It would not be authentic like to not say something.
Exactly. Yeah, my mom, I did another podcast recently and I was like, yeah, my mom was a teacher and I think I've inherited some of her genes. And they were like, you don't say, like, that's not glaringly obvious. Yeah.
Can you see my face right now? Yeah. Oh, you know what? That is so wild that the professions of both of your parents have come up, because now I just have to ask. Like, I was already going to ask, but You just gave me a nice little segue there. How does being a pastor's daughter come out in your work? Because those are things that I don't know if people would be able to connect on the surface, but everything informs us. You're an IP lawyer and an entrepreneur, which, you're not just an IP lawyer from my perspective. The way I've always interacted with you is also as like a CEO, woman in business, supporting other women in business.
Yeah.
How does being a pastor's daughter come out in this kind of work?
The advice, I think, my dad his nickname was the professor. He just gave really good advice. He still does. He's like my secret weapon for, when I'm making big moves. He's very good at listening, and he's very good at helping people to see clarity. And I feel that that's my superpower as well, is like getting people unstuck. So they know where they want to go, but it's like there's so many options or they can't see it. And sometimes you just need someone with that particular lens on the outside to be like, hey, just breathe, and we're going to do this and then that. I remember having a call with a client years ago, and she wanted to make the switch from, she was an employee and she had like a little side hustle, and she wanted to make it full time. And we're just talking it through. And I said, okay, well, from what you've said, here's where I think you may explore. And I just kind of set out like the next 3 things. And then there was silence on the other end of the line. This is before Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, are you still there? She's like, my head just exploded. I have been wrestling with this for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you just fixed my whole life and business in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I've inherited from him. And I've seen how he thinks about when people have issues and problems, and the importance of listening to figure out what's the underlying issue. Like, what are you really worried about, or what are you really trying to fix? And I think that informs how I practice a lot.
I can absolutely see that. And of course, I can see the parts of your mother and teaching coming out as well.
Yeah.
And do you know what's interesting is when I think about both of those professions, to me, I've always said that teaching is inherently an act of love, because for me, my part of my definition of love is wanting to help the other grow, even if it has nothing to do with you.
Yes.
And I feel like, a good pastor is similar. I think that they both act, and you tell me, I don't know your parents, but they both act in the best interest of the other person. That's what those professions do.
And for your point exactly, to their growth. Like my mom used to say to me, the reason why she loved being a teacher is that moment where the child goes from not knowing and unsure to knowing and confident. It's just amazing to her, right? That feeling of seeing that transition. And I feel the same thing when a client gets it, or they see an opportunity that they perhaps hadn't seen before, and now they know they can take advantage of it, and they're like, what? I had never thought about this. It just comes out of me. I was at a dinner the other day, and I sat next to someone who I didn't know. We just got to chatting. I'm like, I'll just coach for no money, no reason, just it comes out.
Sounds kind of like a pastor.
Just insert myself into it. But yeah, that moment where people get it and now see the clarity with where to go next is really addictive to me.
I can see that for sure. Like coming out of you and just the way that you conduct yourself.
What did your parents do? Sorry, I'm just being nosy too.
Oh, yeah. No, that's totally fine. My dad, so my parents split up when I was young. My dad is a salesman and sells, actually when I was really, really young, they worked in grocery stores. And then he sold margarine. And then my stepmom also worked in a grocery store and then went to, I think, produce buying. And then my mom, she worked, you know what? Well, actually, she also worked in a grocery store at one point and a toy store. But I think that was when I was really young. I knew her when I was a young kid. She was like a dispatcher, it's called. So there was this Clorox. You know the brand Clorox?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so the warehouse, she would be the one that dispatched the trucks. That's what that role does, is like make sure that they're all coming in at the same
Like
time or at
this.
the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then she unfortunately she had all sorts of health issues, and so she had to go, and then cancer eventually is what
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose took her in the end. But so she had to go on sick leave, and then my stepdad, who came later in life, was in construction. So yeah, all sorts.
Yeah.
Very different than what I do, but certainly the
But
bedrock.
it's funny. I think nothing, no knowledge is wasted and no experience is wasted. And it's when I first graduated, so I did law school in the UK and then came to Canada. So long story, I was born here. My parents moved
Mhm.
back to Barbados when I was 6 because my dad didn't like the cold anymore. Then I went to England. Then I went to France, and then I finally came back here as a young adult. And when I came back, I wasn't sure that I wanted to practice law because I'd only had the
Hmm.
experience of doing it in large firms, and I was like, this is
Mhm.
not a comfortable, inviting environment for me. I felt like I couldn't really bring my whole self to work. And so I kind of bummed on my brother's couch for a few months. And then I was like, okay, I need to earn some money. And I took a job at a call center. So I was fluent in French because I had a French law degree. And I was a bilingual customer service rep. And my uncles were
Mhm.
like, you have a law degree. Where are you going to go at a call center? And I was like, they pay. I get to keep my French up. It's good hours. And
Mhm.
honestly, Bailey, I credit what I learned there about customer service to being able to distinguish myself when I started my law firm because lawyers aren't taught customer service,
Yeah, you know what? I completely get that.
right?
I
And
do.
so they're not taught it, they're taught how to practice. But here's the thing, lawyers can tell if a contract is great rather than good, right? But the average person can't. The average person remembers, how did it feel? What was the experience like? Did the person talk down to me? Did I understand the process? Did I feel like I was being, seen, heard, and understood? None of that was taught to me in law school. That was all taught to me in the call center.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I was going to write about this deeper at some point, but there are life lessons that I learned from my parents, all my parents, sort of hard working people,
Yeah.
um, that absolutely have informed not just how I work, but actually to a point that you said earlier on the show. You said, people can't copy they can copy the
But
output, but not the input. And do you know where
yeah.
that input came from?
Yeah.
Groceries.
Your
My
parents.
first paid
That's
job
it.
was a cashier.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose, man, I should investigate how like the impact of grocery stores in my upbringing. But there's absolutely a level of customer service to it, right?
Exactly. Logistics, being organized, project management, like all that comes in. Yeah.
Hmm. It's interesting. The input, where the input comes from in IP is, or in intellectual property is kind of, I think, wow, the beauty of life. Like in this way, everyone has IP.
Absolutely. Everyone has created something. The key is that most of us don't see it. So like just now when you were like an email sequence is IP, there are people who
Mm.
are amazing at doing a client intake. I've been through client intake processes that are a thing of beauty.
Mm.
And I've mentioned it to the person, that I'm going through the process with, and they're like, "Oh, doesn't everyone do this?" No, sweet summer child, not everyone does this. This is
No. Oh, yeah. Because it's just their zone of genius. They're just like, no, they don't see it the same way that you do.
Yeah, and what's the thing with the zone of genius is because it comes so easy to it. This is why my job is hard because I can see the zone of genius and I can see how brilliant it is, but the person who has it doesn't see it. The things that come so easy to us, we just assume. I was that way for a long time as well. We assume that everyone else sees it a particular way because it is so obvious to us. And part of understanding and really harnessing your intellectual property, the first step is to acknowledge this is actually genius. It doesn't feel that way because it's really easy to us, but that in itself is the crux of the genius. It's
Mm-hmm.
so easy. It's like breathing for us, but not everyone else sees it the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of just a natural state of being. So
Yeah,
non-noteworthy to the person that's in it.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm. So changing going back a little bit to the TED Talk then and
Yeah,
to what we've been sharing almost about the input is kind of what got me thinking about it again. You know that my work now, especially my doctoral work, is about generative AI. And
yes.
so I was just, when you said input, I'm thinking like inputting into Gen AI, prompting it. That's just,
Mhm.
the connection
Yeah,
was strange. But I thought also, which I just had this thought preparing for this show. I
yeah.
was like, wait, I never even considered what if the girl who took my talk, or parts of it, what
Mhm.
if she had generated it via GPT and doesn't even know it came from me?
That would be wild. That would be wild.
I know, I know. I just had this thought and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, in this case, whose IP is it?
So here's the thing. Yeah, AI has opened the proverbial can of worms with respect to IP because the definition of intellectual property as it stands is that it's a creation of the human mind. Just an important distinction.
Mm.
So the guidance that we've gotten in the States and in Canada from the Intellectual Property Office here and the Patent and Trademark Office in the States is that if something is generated through ChatGPT, it cannot be registered as trademark or copyright because it's not a human creation. Now that may change
Wow.
as we go through this iteration of where we are now, but currently that's the issue.
Hmm.
And so again, it comes back to intention. Are you creating something with the intent to be able to protect it through registration? In which case, ChatGPT is not your best friend. If you're creating something because you want quick captions on social media, you don't really care. You're not trying to, register it or protect it. It's the easy way to get significant content out. But that's a really good point. Do you know there's I think we talked about this in Arizona. There's a suit by several well-known authors, including the originator of Sweet Summer Child, George R. R. Martin, where they are suing OpenAI on the basis that the tool was trained
Mm.
on their books. Their argument is,
Oh.
we've got copyright. We never gave you permission to use our books in this way.
Oh, interesting. I am dying to see how that turns out
Me too.
because, of course, I was following the actors' strike too,
Yes. Yes.
which all came down to AI and intellectual property and who would get credit for it.
Exactly.
Um, uh, Listeners, everyone, we don't have the answer to this. Just so you know, you're listening to someone who studies Gen AI and an intellectual property lawyer, and we're telling you this is unfolding as you're listening to
Yeah.
this. The cards are being laid down, and we are deciding what it is right now in history.
Yeah. It's completely uncharted waters. And this is the interesting thing. I don't know if you remember, maybe 2 years back, there was a controversy over Chappelle and Chappelle's show on Netflix. And Dave
Hmm.
Chappelle had said, so Chappelle's show, the episodes were supposed to
Hmm.
be released on Netflix. And he was
Hmm.
encouraging people to boycott it because he hadn't received any payment for it. And this is why. At the time that he created
Oh,
his show, there were no streamers. That business model didn't exist.
that's right.
So when he did his contract, the contract would have mentioned probably DVDs and um, to order things off the
Mm.
cable, etc. It didn't envisage streaming, so it wasn't part of the rights that he retained to himself. And with intellectual property, you have to be
Wow.
really specific about what you grant and what you keep for yourself. And so he wasn't entitled to any royalties because it wasn't in the contract.
Wow. So they
Right.
just couldn't vision far enough about how content would be distributed in the future,
Exactly. And that's
which
what
is
came up with the actors
wow.
strike. Yeah. It's just yeah.
Oh, it's far out there, but not to us. I
No,
hope that people listening would think, actually, this is pretty close. They probably thought this was far out there just 20 years ago. And and like now we're talking about people's likeness, right? Their AI being used, and can that be used
exactly.
without their consent, right?
And if anyone's
Which,
interested in seeing a portrayal of this, the new Black Mirror season, well, new, I don't know when it's going to come out, but the most recent one, I think it was season 6,
mhm.
has the episode Joan is Awesome, which is all about not reading terms and conditions, and buried in a 50-page terms and conditions, the grant of the use of the likeness forever and ever in whatever way they saw fit.
Mhm. Is this the one with she's spoiler alert that she sees
Yep,
herself in the show?
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So context, if you're really super obsessed with this and you want to watch, don't listen for the next 2 minutes. But basically, she finds out that she is in a show. Imagine watching like Netflix and seeing yourself in a show, and it's acting out your life.
Hmm.
And that is all I'll tell you about the episode. And you can go play with that thought experiment there. Which, speaking of, actually, in every episode, Andrea, I do a thought experiment with the guest.
Okay.
And basically, this is just a total hypothetical situation related to the topic. It's just free of the constraints of reality. Like, let's just go far to the point where people are wondering if we've had too much of our drink. That is a great thought experiment, if you ask me. So, thinking about right now and Gen AI and how we're coming up with, we're literally right now coming up with what intellectual property laws should look like for this. And now let's say, suppose all laws regarding intellectual property are suddenly abolished. Like you do not get to own your ideas because ideas exist everywhere all of the time, all around you. How do you think that different industries would be affected? Like, are there unexpected industries that would be affected? Would this lead to more innovation because people don't own
Oh,
ideas, or would this lead to complete chaos? Like, we could go
oh
in
my
any direction.
goodness. That's a great question. Gosh, I think every industry would be affected. I think the obvious ones like would be in the creative sector, right? So films and
Mhm.
books, etc. But down to supermarkets, right? Which are based on brands
Yeah.
and who pays
Oh,
to,
that's a good thought experiment. How would supermarkets be affected by the abolishment of IP laws? I've never thought about this before.
yeah.
Hmm.
I think that the innovation chaos, it's a juicy question. I think
Hmm.
so. I'm going to preface this by saying I have this ongoing conversation with my partner who is philosophically communist. She's a really
Mm-hmm.
interesting mix with a business lawyer. But anyway, so we have this
Mm-hmm.
conversation about a utopia and how my position has always been, how are you going to get people to do things if there's no reward for, working hard or inventing something? And he's like, that's because you've grown up in this system. If we were in a system where all your needs were taken care of, you would invent for the sheer pleasure of it because that's what your skill set was. And that's what brought you pleasure.
You know
So,
what? I do think that pleasure and learning would be a
yeah.
default state of humans taken care of.
That's it. So if we were in that
Hmm.
environment where you really were free, it may bring more innovation, right? We think of it now as I would only invent if I could protect it because otherwise people would steal it. But that's because we're in a
Mm.
zero-sum capitalist world
I was
where,
going to say the paradigm is capitalism, which
yeah,
means it has to be for something of maybe even monetary or wealth value, right?
yeah. But if we didn't have that, then arguably it would bring more innovation because you're contributing to the entire advancement of the society. That's a great question. I'm going to talk to him about that when I get home. It's a great
You'll
question.
have to give me a follow up and see what you
Yeah,
think. But I want to go back to the grocery store because
yeah,
I'm still fixated on where, because a supermarket
yeah,
is something that everyone can relate to. So what am I missing? Like when I
yeah,
walk into a supermarket, where's the IP? I suppose like
yeah.
the logo, like
The
just
logos
even
and the
starting on
name.
the outside.
So
Right. Oh
All
my
of the
gosh.
branding, all of the logos. We have the whole thing where you've got like the store brand costs less than the premium brand, but it's the same thing inside. If you read any of the like Reddit or whatever, like it's the same thing, right?
Oh my gosh,
So what
yeah.
would happen if the premium brands, if anyone could use them?
You just blew my mind because I just thought, does literally anyone could call themselves
Yeah,
Whole Foods,
anything. That's right.
and there actually would be no consumer trust that you could build up because it's
Yeah,
IP that has them reserve the name Whole Foods.
that's exactly it. So how would you know? My mother, who's famously frugal, right? She is a
Mm-hmm.
bargain shopper. Once she was visiting me and she's like, I got Tide, the laundry detergent, for 50% off. And I was immediately suspicious because Tide is never that much off.
No, it's expensive. Are
Because
you
it's a
joking?
premium brand, right? It's like Whole Foods doesn't have 50% off, but Basics does. So I said, can I take a look at that? It wasn't Tide, it was Time with an M, but everything else was the same. It was the orange bottle with the circles. And I went
Mm-hmm.
back the next week and it was off the shelves because I'm 100% sure that Tide filed something, right?
Of
But
course, of course.
it's the same thing because if you can't determine what is premium or what is better quality and what's not, that would lead to some chaos. Or the
That would
government
lead,
would have to say
or
you can have a certain minimum level of quality across the board.
so I think that your partner would be saying, this is heading in the direction of socialism,
Yeah,
which remember, not all bad, right? Like
yeah,
there are
yeah,
blessings and curses to all forms of thinking about the
exactly.
paradigm of society.
Yeah,
And for this one, because the chaos part of it is that in the immediate future, we would not be able to determine like what is Sobeys, which is Canadian, and
yeah,
what is, I don't know, what do they got?
heroes. Yeah,
Morton's. They've got down
yeah,
the hall or down the street from me in New York, and the brands themselves.
yeah,
But in a world where there's no IP around the products and it's not brand related at all, then maybe it would be about the value of the product itself.
yeah.
But then, yeah, but then who owns? Yeah, wow, that's a tough one. I
Right.
asked you a tough one. That's a good thought
That's
experiment,
it's a
though.
good thought experiment, though. It's going to keep me up at night, I think. Yeah, because we're so accustomed to live in an environment where your name and your brand is like what companies live and die on. They're whole people whose career is to help companies or individuals build brands and maintain them. So if you don't have a brand, what do you have in the marketplace? What is Coca-Cola without Coca-Cola? What's the Nike swoosh? Like it would change
Right.
commerce entirely. Also,
Hmm.
drug companies, right, who spend billions of dollars
Oh,
because they can get patents. But I actually,
right.
and
So would they be motivated to do that without the patent?
yeah, I mean, from my perspective, that might not be such a bad thing because perhaps we would put more money into prevention as opposed to
Listen,
cure.
preach. I was gonna say, man, like I don't know if healthcare is the best example here
Yeah,
because
no, I think that might be a good thing. I think that's what I'm saying. I think that might be a good thing for humanity. If you can't
yeah, I
make
think
drugs, let's put it in the prevention.
we could use a little chaos in most especially in this American healthcare space. Holy, they could use just a bit of chaos before we come
Yeah,
back to just a bit more socialism.
yeah,
Though that word get beyond the word to the idea of
yeah,
everybody should be taken care of, right? And
yeah.
IP should not get in the way of that. And even the fact that we call it property is very interesting
It
to
is.
me.
And there are absolutely there's thought leadership around the fact that we should abolish it, especially with respect to thoughts and ideas and ways of doing things.
Hmm.
Um, there's definitely, there's thought leadership around that, which is I am who I am and I should be able to say whatever and whatever has influenced me and you shouldn't be gatekeeping our ideas. I don't necessarily agree, obviously, but
Yeah.
there's definitely and there's pros and cons to that, right? And there's certainly an argument to be made again if we want ideas to be spread. I do think, and as I said at the beginning, for me there is a difference between something it's not tangible because IP is intangible, but something that you've created with the intent, it has a form, right? It has a container. So a book or a course, which you've created with the intention of it being sold. I do think there's a distinction for me between that and an idea, especially if it's a philosophical or a thought leadership idea, where you do want humanity to get that idea, right? You do want, if it's a idea that's for the good of us all, you do want it to spread. And for me, that's kind of the dividing line. Like, there's IP that should not be property, perhaps, and there's IP that has all of the characteristics of other assets and should be able to be protected.
Hmm. Yeah, I was even thinking to myself, like, just as you've been speaking there and thinking about why we call it intellectual property, and I was wondering where IP came from. And so I threw it in a little search there as we were talking. And it originated from the desire to recognize and protect creations of the mind, a wide range of intangible assets. So clearly, along the way, with literary and artistic works and designs and symbols and sculptures and statues, people realized, like, just doing this one time, like, I created this, it's a value, you're going to pay this much for a painting. It
Yeah,
should keep its value. Like, I think
absolutely.
as capitalism, we went into like early and mid stage, it was like, oh, wait a second, we need to find a way to put a framework around this. So,
Yeah.
wow, it's all connected, Andrea.
Who knew we were going to be having a philosophical conversation about capitalism and socialism? But here we are.
I suppose now that I've come to the, nearer to the end of this talk, I should have started there with the word property in the name. How did I not come to this realization before? Of course it was going to be a conversation about that. Seriously. Like,
Yeah.
okay. Let me bring it back. Get too hype. I'm getting too hype. So another thing that I have every guest do is, and they get to choose a segment, and, wishful thinking, baby thinking, and we chose overthinking. And we are going to look at some absurd definitions of patent. We're going to look at some patent descriptions.
Mhm.
I'm going to read the patent description to you, and I want you to try and guess what the patent was for, or what the item is. Okay, so let's start, and I'll just do a few. Okay. The description is a gravity-defying entertainment cylinder constructed of a helical spring capable of locomotion down inclined planes. This device exhibits properties of kinetic and potential energy transformation, providing visual and tactile amusement. Okay, oh my gosh,
Pogo
even
stick?
like, you know what? That was too hard.
Was it pogo
That's
stick?
a wow, no, but that was like in the realm. It's a slinky. But like,
No.
I was literally listening to me say that, and I'm like, how is anyone even gonna guess like the category of this? And honestly, I can see how pogo stick, you would have got that. Like, entertainment cylinder,
Yeah, the thing that's
helical springs, locomotion.
downward. Yeah,
Wow.
the
You're
slinky's
really
good.
good at that.
Slinky
You
was
are
the
an overthinker.
downward. That's it. Because that's what was throwing me off. I was like, well, pogo sticks aren't necessarily just downward, but I couldn't think of anything else. That's good. Yeah.
Well, see, like, when I made the game, I'm like, I'm not gonna. It's a good thing I'm asking Andrea this, because I would not win this game. Okay, one more.
Okay.
Okay. An electronic apparatus designed for the generation of rhythmic oscillations. This device features an internal motor system that creates pulsating movements, which can be adjusted in intensity and pattern. Okay. My head is going. Encased in a durable, ergonomically designed exterior, it is suitable for localized application, providing sensations intended for relaxation or muscle relief or personal enjoyment.
So I know where my brain went. I'm going to say to be, I don't know if you have children listening, massage wand, but can be used in different ways.
You're actually right.
Right? Ah!
It's a massage gun. You little nasties. I know what you were thinking. Listen, I was thinking it too, but
Like, what's
you are
the
right. It is a
reason for
massage
it?
gun. Listen, okay? See, patent descriptions can get confusing. The intellectual part of the property. How do you describe this stuff sometimes?
That's
All
hilarious.
right.
Whew.
Okay, Andrea, we are coming to the close of this soon. But near the end of each episode, the last segment is called Train of Thought.
Yeah.
So at the end of each episode, I ask my guests to continue the train of thought from the last episode. So it starts off with 1, what would you say is the main topic of our conversation tonight? Main topic or theme?
What is intellectual property and should it be protected?
I would say that it's a good theme. What is intellectual property and should it be protected? Now, the last episode, when I asked them to sum up our conversation, we talked a bit about art and expressing, funny
Okay.
enough, but they said the summary of the conversation is everything is connected to love or fear. Everything is connected to either
Ooh.
love or fear. So to continue this train of thought, what you have to do is let's think through how does what is intellectual property and should
Yeah.
it be protected connect to everything comes down to love or fear.
Yeah. This is
Which
brilliant.
by the way, wow.
It's brilliant.
I
because
couldn't have written that one better.
it's exactly what we've been talking about, right? Are you creating out of love and the intent to share? Or are you hoarding out of fear?
Mhm.
Are you acting out of fear of what will happen if you release your intellectual property into the world?
And intent of the person taking it.
That
Are
too.
they
Yes.
acting out of fear because they don't think that they can produce an original enough story that will garner views and engagement and really get their ideas out there?
They're operating out of scarcity and not out of abundance, which is another word for love.
Yeah, I would definitely put
Yeah.
that in the same category for
Yeah.
sure. So then is intellectual property inherently out of fear or is it out of love?
I think it depends on the intent. I don't think it's inherently one or the other. It's like money. It's neither good or bad. It's what you do with it. I think it's the
Mhm.
same thing with intellectual property. It depends on the intent with which you create it.
So it has to be put into the core of it.
Yeah.
As in, because of course we can think of many, many reasons where intellectual property keeps an artist creating. Like it keeps them being able to put
Oh,
love
yeah.
out in the world. So we
Yeah.
can think of definitely some love applications of it.
Absolutely. I mean, everything is energy. So it takes energy to create. If you are only given out the energy and it's never replenished, you're going to run out of the creative energy with which to create.
Wow. Okay, that is such a fabulous place to end our show together because when I continue this train of thought, they are going to have to connect in the next episode, what is intellectual property and to whatever it is that we talk about there. So,
Yeah.
Andrea, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to leave with? Not so much about promoting services or
Yeah.
products, but about like, what's that one idea you want to leave with people before we go?
Begin with the end in mind. When you're creating, think about the end result. What is it that you're trying to achieve? And that's in art, that's in your business, in life. Begin with the end in mind.
I love that. And as at the end of this podcast, this is what I had in mind, which was such a lovely conversation with you. So cheers to you. And thank you very much for being my
Thank you so
guest.
much for having me.
I loved my conversation with Andrea. And when it comes to what I should do about someone taking parts of my TED Talk, I'm not sure it was fully answered here, but that's the part of thinking things through that we might not always like. You don't always get a perfect answer at the end. However, I do think I'm a bit closer. If what I would love is credit for my ideas while at the same time lifting up someone else and not deterring them from talking about digital well-being, then I think maybe I should reach out directly to her. Now, I will just have to let you know how this all goes on a future episode. So thanks for listening.